All right, here we are, week 7, the end of October, Halloween week. Just going to go through now what is going to be essentially our transition into a new idea of 20th century independence. And so we were looking at India, which is obviously this large continental country, and now we're going to look at the independent countries that are created in Africa. And so we're going to start that out by kind of doing a little intro assignment that focuses on some of the ideas of where and how independence started to come out of these different colonial countries. And so basically there's something called the Berlin Conference, where basically the imperialism of Africa is set. And there's a little video that's attached here that kind of gets into more detail about this, so I'm not going to go into a huge explanation about it. But basically, in 1884, there's a meeting where all of these major European powers come together to basically divide up Africa. And as a result of that, there are these long-term implications as to how that will impact what was basically a very divided culturally continent. I mean, Africa is made up of very different tribal and kingdoms and groups of people. If you look at East, South, West Africa, very different groups of people. And all of a sudden now they're basically being regulated by all of these very different European people who have different ideas of how to directly or indirectly control the idea of these colonies, basically. So this is just going to be kind of an examination or re-examination of African nations. And so in the Berlin Conference, they basically did this kind of in a division of how to kind of create these countries based on that control over those areas. And what you're going to do is re-examine those borders by watching the attached video, which is down here. There's this YouTube video. There are blank maps, and then there is a link actually to actual maps. And what you're going to do is make your own map. So you're going to kind of use what they did in the Berlin Conference to then create your own view using the post-colonial maps from previous realistic history, using background text, and then create your own nations based off that information. And so what you're going to apply then is basically a one-page explanation of like the process you use to create the borders. So you're going to make your own set of independent nations using ideas of post-Africa or post-colonial ideas. So this is pretty straightforward, kind of a fun little assignment to do the first day, kind of re-examining history. Now the next thing in day 2 is there's going to be some videos that are linked here from a documentary called Gun, Germs, and Steel, which is based on a book that goes into a lot of the background and detail of how Africa became what it was politically, socially, culturally, and then kind of how that played out over the years as it became a colonial state. And then the last thing you're going to do is a summative, which is basically a case study. You will be assigned a different group, or not assigned, sorry. You're going to read case studies for these 4 different countries and use it to fill out the graphic organizer, which is attached. That looks like this. Well, this is the case study. And you're going to read about all 4 of them, and then you're going to use that to fill out the graphic organizer that is attached. So for each of these countries, Ghana, Congo, Algeria, Kenya, you're going to give the colonizing power, the years they were colonized, the central question, which it says see second page of notes. So if you go back to here, you can see what each question is. They're right here. So you're going to write each question in the graphic organizer. And then basically, how did Africans answer this question? How did Europeans answer this question? So that'll come from the reading. And you're just given like a couple sentences in a response. And the big thing that we want to focus on with these 4 countries is the beginning process of seeing the 2 perspectives. What was the African versus what was the European perspective of the way that these individual countries were formed and how they applied to these ideas. And you're looking at 4 very different African states. Algeria is very different from the Congo. Ghana and Kenya are very different from the Congo and Algeria. And you'll start to see that a lot of that has to do with the European nation that colonized them. And just kind of a hint, you're going to see a different state colonizing power for at least 2 of the 4, 3 of the 4. So that's one thing that you want to focus for, and this will be kind of the beginning step to figuring out kind of the idea of perspective when it comes to Africa, because that's going to be a big part. You don't just have Britain and the Indian state with these cultural differences of Hindus and Muslims. You have the colonizing power being France, England, the Dutch, the Belgians, and so on and so forth. And then you also have cultural differences between tribal groups. I mean, we've talked a little bit about Rwanda and the Tutsi, and you look at the Bantu-speaking people, and we start to get into South Africa with the differences culturally there. So there's a lot of differences that start to play out in all these different states, and we're going to kind of start taking it piecemeal, but then we'll eventually put it on your shoulders to do some investigation into specific countries. All right, so that's week 7. Again, if you have any questions, please send me a message to Schoology or through email or come into office hours 8:30 to 10:30 on Friday.